What's up, guys? So I have come to terms with my brake lines. I just had to get them done. They're holding me up on the exhaust, and I regret buying stainless lines. I bought them. They're actually model specific for the car. I think they might be B body. I could be wrong, but anyway, I'm working with a Charger here, which is a B body. But with this factory with the factory junction block that's on the driver's side frame where all the brake lines come together, and then you have that safety switch, um, the brake lines didn't connect to that. They're like all over the place. And if, for those of you who don't know, stainless doesn't bend very well. Once it's bent, it's kind of there, unless it's longer, and then you can kind of massage it. But it's definitely not ideal. I would not recommend it for those of you who are not used to doing this kind of thing. I think I've sworn off stainless brake lines for the rest of my years, just because it's just so hard to work with. Unless you're creating something out of nothing, when you have a pre-bent stainless line, kind of reiterating that it's just there. It just wants to live where it was bent, and that's it. But sometimes you can get it finagled closely. But anyway, I've been pulling my hair out. I've been avoiding this. There's just certain jobs that you just avoid when you're building a car, and this for me is one of them. So because it's holding me up on other things like, driving and getting my headers back on the car and installing my steering column, I just needed all that freedom inside that area to create these brake lines, and I have to do it from scratch. And I'll show you why. So this is actually where that junction box would go. I call it a junction box. I've heard some people call it a shuttle valve. I don't think it's a shuttle valve. It's just got a switch in it that senses one circuit, which is the bottom would be the rear brakes, the top would be the front brakes, and so on. So I put it on 5 times to try to okay, maybe this will work. And I just couldn't get it to work because I'm using a Wilwood proportioning valve. So as you'll notice, there's 2 front outs, so FO, FO, and then this is the rear out right here. So that kind of complicates things, and it also makes using this junction box a little more complicated, which is annoying. But so I decided to just get rid of this thing altogether. I still have it. I didn't throw it away in case I could sell the car to someone who cares, but I don't care at this point. I'm over it. so what I've done is I had the rear stainless line already in the car. It fit pretty good. It works. And then on the rear end, I had those shaped okay. They're not the best. If I could go back, I would have ordered all stainless lines, but I happened to actually order a spare or another set of front brake lines in steel. And I'm not sure what I did with that or why I did it, but I'm glad. It was just the front set, so the one that goes across the firewall and for the passenger side front brakes, and then the one that goes under the frame rail for the driver's side. So I've since replaced the stainless lines with steel. And these things are they look the same at a glance, but if you look closely, the tube is a little more dull. That's kind of how you tell. But these are so much easier to bend and mold to your satisfaction. You can tweak them, and you don't need a tool to bend them, in other words. So here's what I've got. So I've got the passenger one on. As you can see, it's right here. This is where it kind of drops in. It actually did bend down, and I think the idea was for it to go to that junction box, but I bent it up, and once it's actually just sitting in there. I think I have maybe a thread or a cross thread in there just kind of holding it, but once it's in, it should be a little tighter to the firewall. And then I just had to make this guy. Of course, I only have stainless hardline to make custom lines out of, and I had to make this one. I've tried on this one a few times and failed, of course. And then with these tight bends, you have to put your nut on, but then if it's got a bend in it, you can't put the nut on far enough to put a flare on it. It's just a hassle, and that's just why I've been avoiding it. So it's come down to needing to do it, and here I am doing it. So sometimes you just gotta head down and go for it. So that's what I'm doing. So I made this guy. Unfortunately, I'm having to use these junction blocks, which I'm not wild about, but it just is what it is. And so I'm only using 2. Let's see. Oh, I'm using just 1. So just this guy. That's for the or the driver front. So the rear is what I'm working on right now. And so I have this residual pressure valve, and this is only here because, or for two reasons. If you have a car with a master cylinder under the floorboards, you need to use this. It's kind of like a check valve. And it allows you to bleed the air out of the systems. If the caliper is above the master cylinder line, it won't let it backflow. So that's, Will Wood recommended this. This is a 10 psi residual pressure valve. Let's see if you can see it there. And so this has to be incorporated into the rear brakes because I'm using a drum in the back and Will Wood disc brakes in the front. I think they're 11-inch rotors, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I bought them. So anyway, so I had this piece bent up pretty closely here. I want to show you. Let me go grab it. Be right back. I feel like I've been doing CrossFit, getting under the car, getting back out underneath the car, standing up, sitting down, standing up, sitting down. It's like, I don't know, you guys who do CrossFit are probably laughing at me right now. That's fine. So I think this is the one. So this is what I have here, and this is as messy as I get right here. This is currently driving me crazy, but this is where the work's been happening. Let's get this guy out of the way. I think that's my guy. No, sorry, this is my guy. Yeah, see how sideways things can go if you just start working on the wrong piece of tubing. So this is my rear out tube. I've got a little tiny like 15-20 degree back-to-back offset there, and if you're doing these offsets, you got to remember to do the one closest or furthest away from the end first. Otherwise you cannot put the offset bend in it. You can only do one bend. That's kind of a thing I learned when I was an electrician, that you got to do the one furthest away first and then do the one towards the end. So so there's that. And then so I'm coming down. This is like basically looking at what we were just looking at, and it comes straight down and then it jogs over. It's in line with the other ones. Well, let me put it up there for you so you can visualize it. So I have a real tough time with letting my OCD get in the way of progress, and I'm sure that's something a lot of you out there struggle with as well. It's real. It's a real thing. Like when you're trying to build a really nice car or something nice, trying to do something really cool, and it's like you gotta just let it go. So as you'll see, these are not perfect, but I have some adjustability with this guy. I can actually pull this guy to left and right and bend it accordingly. So I think I'm in the right area, but my biggest thing is the vertical lines. I want them all to line up, and then I want the bottoms to be very closely in line too, like where these 90s come together. I want to be able to have those all nicely in line. And then this one right here, I'm gonna make a mark. Oops, sorry. I'm gonna make a mark on this guy where I want it, probably like right where my thumb is. Well, I want that to 90 downward and then connect here. But what I was saying earlier is you can't put the nut on. I'm sorry, you have to put the nut and flare on first before you bend this guy, because if you bend it, you won't be able to get the nut on far enough in order to go through the die on the bender. I'm sorry, on the flaring tool, and I'll show you in a sec here. But I want to have this, I got to mark this 90 where I want it to drop straight into this guy here. So let me make sure. Yeah, I already marked it. Yeah, I think we're good to go. So we have a little bit of wiggle room, and you just gotta hope for the best on this kind of stuff. But yeah, here I go with CrossFit. Don't step on the creeper. All right. Dramatic, huh? Really getting dramatic in my old age. Come on, there we go. All right, let me get this thing set up. So I have two options for flaring. So I've got this guy, which is something that I've always wanted. This is like your benchtop ultimate flaring tool. This does everything you need besides bending the tube. This is all about flaring. So these are like $250 at the Schmummet place. So I've always wanted one of these, so I had to buy it, of course. I've always had the little clamshell stupid one that allows the tube to slip and drives you nuts. So I just thought, hey, get one of these. I've seen so many people using them. They are incredible. They do such great jobs, and they do stainless like it's nothing. I mean, it is more of a pull with stainless, but so worth it. So the second option, and this is actually really cool. Whoever invented this thing is a genius. The second option is this guy, and this is from Earl's, probably from overseas somewhere. But it's actually an on-car flaring tool. So you loosen up these two bolts, get your tube in there, and then you have like a little sight hole right there, and you just line the edge of the tube up after you've prepped it and deburred it into that little sight window there, and then you insert a flat bolt there to make sure the tube is inserted perfectly into that little hole, and then you take that guy out, tighten these things up, and then put the operation 1 side into this die, and then you flip it over and put the other operation in, which is this little guy here. These things have, so operation 1 would go in first, and then operation 2, oh, come on man, I can't see. Op 2, there's op 1, and then I guess that's op 2. So you basically flip it over and just simplify what I'm trying to say here. So, and they even give you a little tube or a little cup full of grease if you don't have it. So yeah, that is what I'm working with. So that is going to come in handy if I need to cut brake lines on the car and I don't want to pull them off. That's going to be awesome. Not how to use it yet, but I did use it just to see how it worked on one of my previous versions of what I'm working on now. So let me get this set up so you guys can watch me do this. I know you might have seen it before. If you have, go ahead and fast forward. If you haven't, check it out. It's actually really cool. All right, so this is where it gets a little tricky. So when you start getting into the tighter bends, like this, for instance, this is a tight bend, and where I need to end up, I need to have this line is my length reference as to where the bend needs to drop down. So I need to put this tube nut on first. This is a biggie. Don't forget to put your tube nut on. But notice how I'm not bending it first. Here's why. This is the top side of that die that holds the brake line into the flaring tool. And so this actually has 2 different sides on it. You can see how each side is shaped differently. Well, we're going to use the one that is not flat, basically on the bottom. You can see how this one is not flat. That's what we're looking for. That's the double flare one. I'm not sure what this is, but it's not what we need. So we're going to use that side. And it's got nipples in it to index. Basically these little guys right here, these little indents, actually allow you to not, or prevent you from putting this die together incorrectly. So they basically just clamp on. So basically I want to set this guy up just like this. So that's where you want to be, right on the edge of that block. Okay, now that we have that, I'm going to put the top side of our die on, and as long as you're level, and I always like to push it out just a little bit beyond level, because there is an op 0 on this, and the op 0 is the one that has a flat head on it, just like the handheld one, and that all that it does is has a flat edge on it, and it basically keeps the tube flush with the end of the die, basically. So you don't even have to clamp it, you just hold your finger on it, and then that pushes it flat with the die, and then you wrap this guy over, push this pin in, and give this guy a crank. And this is important too. You want to make sure that this die is clamped tight, because the tube will slide, especially with stainless. Okay. All right. And again, this is just for people who don't know. So now you can see my tube. It's right in there. It's flush with the end thanks to our op 0. And then we're going to go to option 1, 3/16. I guess I gotta go that way. So it's upside down, but you can kind of get the picture. See that? Option 1, focus. Focus. I don't know if this thing's focusing. Alright, well, you get the picture. Option 1, 3/16. This guy is tight. And oh my god, I just almost forgot. But I didn't. You're probably saying, you almost forgot the nut. I did almost forget the nut. It's how easy it is just to forget it, and I would have to redo this. Well, I could have just cut the flare off and redone it like that, but yeah, things can go south just that quick. So now that the tube nut is on, back to 0. Okay. Yeah, so you have a much better chance at making this tight bend with the nut on. It's not going to be perfect, but none of this is. This is not a perfect world. I try to be perfect, and I always land a little bit short, and that's all right. As long as you're perfect with brakes holding fluid and engines holding oil and that sort of thing, you're fine. Okay, so option 1, back to where we were. You guys see that? Again, 3/16, and then you can see the little point on that, on the die there. So now it's just going to go in. You want to keep an eye on the tube to make sure it's not going to move. But I am basically just pulling it till it doesn't go anymore. And you can see the first part of the flare in there. See how it's kind of rounded now? So we're going to go to option 2. 3/16. Yeah, they double up some of these, so you kind of got to watch for it. But there's option 2, 3/16 and 1/4 inch or 4.75 millimeter. So now it's just that easy to change dies. So this one's always a lot easier than the first. And then once that die goes all the way into that block, you are good to go. So let's get you guys back up here. That doesn't look good. Huh. Wonder what the heck happened. Alright, let's try that again. Yeah, I don't think option 2 worked all the way. Alright. Just gonna start over. Make sure your cut is square. Just dress it up real nice and square at the very least. Take some linemans or some wire cutters and stick it in there so you have no burrs inside, and then close the jaws to get the outside ones. You can always dress it up on a grinder, but I think too much would make it too soft, so I would just try to use hand tools if possible. Good enough, I think. Okay, back to it. Let's try this again. All right. under the car. Trying to reorient myself here. It's gonna go that way. Now, it's gonna go under. Somewhere in there. See what I'm doing here? Or can you see where I'm getting at? So basically I want the risers to be as straight and uniform as I can, but and I have a little bit of wiggle room to move this guy that way, which is going to be perfect. So I need to, so I've already marked where my bend should basically end, which is kind of a tricky deal because you have to understand where or how many inches your bends consume. And that kind of goes the same with bending tube steel for like a roll cage. It's the same thing. You just got to be familiar with how many inches a bend takes. And it varies from size of the tubing, obviously. But we're going to get into that when we build the roll cage for the old Ford. So more on that to come. But here we go. So I'm going to try to get this thing turned down, and I may have to shorten it. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, this is just trial and error, really. And that's all I know how to do. But I will say using this gets you pretty close. But because it's not the same diameter of the tube, you can kind of have a lot of pitfalls with using this kind of thing. But it gives you the general idea of what you need to do with your tubing and to see if it's even possible. My recommendation is to try not to bend too tight of bends on these. Make long swooping bends, because if you try to make, you can make this really tight bends like 90 degrees, but you can't with this stuff here. You cannot do real tight bends with that, so you got to keep that in mind. So let me go get you back set up where I can bend this thing. All right, you're gonna watch me ruin this piece of tube right now. I hope I'm wrong. But yeah, this is where the brain teaser comes in, because you have to make sure you're in this right orientation, the same way you're looking at it in the car, and then you have to be able to think through which way it bends. So it's going to bend this way down, and I'm going to use every bit of this. Okay. And this is what I mean about this not being perfect with the tube nut on there. So I'm trying to coming down, so that needs to go like that. It's opposite for you guys, obviously. But what I'm talking about is in this situation where we had to install the tube nut first before the flare. I'm sorry, before we bent it, because I wouldn't be able to put the flare on, so I had to flare it first and bending it second. And this is the complication that brings. You're not going to have a perfect bend, so you can don't go to 90, in other words. All right, give me a sec here. Gotta unload some groceries. All right, back to this. So coming down off that, and I gotta find my must bend point, and I'm kind of over a barrel with this. I really just have to put a 90 in it, and if I screw it up, I have to start over. So no pressure. not gonna be a 90. Oh, it's gonna be close. But not quite a 90. There we go. That's as good as it's gonna get, I think. Alright, let's see if I ruined it. Well, I haven't shown a lot of this because of this reason, because it's really tight in here, even without the steering column or headers. But just want to get it, see if I can even do this, or how bad it looks. If I go there, and I go there, huh? I really need to bend that tighter. Yeah. I might be able to bend that. I'm gonna take a gamble and see if I can do a full 90 with this thing with some pliers. You guys are probably cringing right now, but that's okay. Or just at least finish the bend off. It's kind of all I'm after. Without kinking, of course. Sometimes you just gotta throw caution to the wind and just do it. Almost. Almost. Yeah. Let's see if I can do some more on that. You just don't want to kink the brake line. That's bad. But I think I can do this. If not, here you go. So you kind of see where I'm at here as far as this guy goes. Just need a little more angle on there, which I think I can achieve. I just got to do it on the bench. But you kind of see where I'm going with this. It's not perfect, but it should hold brake fluid and it should work. But they should all look relatively uniform and out of the way. That's also a big deal. So I got a column going through here, headers going through here. It's a very complicated area, especially on A bodies. B bodies you got a lot more room to work with, but A bodies are a nightmare. I don't envy those guys at all. So, all right, let me get on the bench and see if I can bend this more. See this creeper? Don't buy that. Trust me, it's junk. I won't even say what auto parts store I bought that from, but I thought it was an upgrade. It's not. Maybe I'm just too big. I don't know, but it's awful. Makes me very angry sometimes when I'm trying to get something done. But I do weigh 240, so that might be why. Hard to say. All right, let me get this jigged up here.